Imagine you have this foundational document, like a text that entirely shapes how you view the world, authority, and reality itself.
Right, the ultimate blueprint for your life.
Exactly. And you think you understand it perfectly, but then you find out that this ancient text you've been relying on had actually been passed through a massive empire-altering translation filter before it ever reached your hands.
It's like the ultimate historical game of telephone.
Yeah, but a game of telephone where the stakes are the entire cosmological structure of a civilization. So welcome to the deep dive. Today, the sources we are unpacking make a really provocative, intellectually rigorous claim. They argue that Western Christianity, as it's understood today, is actually a severe departure from true Middle Eastern monotheism.
It is a massive historical and linguistic thesis.
It really is. And I want to clarify our mission right up front for you listening. Our goal today is not to debate personal faith, and we are definitely not here to endorse a specific side.
No, not at all.
We're just here to impartially unpack the fascinating historical and linguistic arguments laid out in this text. We're putting on our investigative historian hats today.
Which is the best way to approach this, really, because to understand this breakdown, the sources say you have to look at the raw history of empires, linguistics, and power.
Right. So set the stage for us. What is the big picture context here?
Well, the sources argue that the authentic Middle Eastern Hebrew Torah and the Gospel promoted a purely monotheistic practice, and it had this strict, non-negotiable rule.
Which way?
You never bind the infinite creator into physical creation, period. The creator is entirely separate from the universe.
Okay, so total separation of the divine and the physical.
Exactly. But what we know today as the Western church model took those original texts and filtered them through Greco-Roman philosophy and, pagan frameworks, basically.
Which is a huge claim. To understand exactly how a purely monotheistic tradition transformed like that, we have to start at the microscopic level, right?
We do, because this shift didn't happen overnight. It started with what the author describes as a linguistic hijacking.
A linguistic hijack. I love that phrasing. So let's look at the words themselves. How did early Western theologians hijack the language?
Well, they essentially took Semitic linguistics and forced them into Greek metaphysics.
Okay, break that down for me.
So in the pure Semitic framework, the framework of Abraham, Moses, and the historical Jesus, the creator holds absolute separate jurisdiction.
Right.
So when that ancient culture used titles like, son or Lord, they were not describing biology or literal descent. The sources emphasize that these terms denoted a functional legal office of delegated authority on earth.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. So it's like a CEO assigning legal power of attorney to a proxy executive.
Yes, that's a great way to look at it.
It's an office.
Right.
An earthly delegation, not actual DNA. The proxy executive doesn't suddenly share the CEO's genetic code just because they can sign contacts in their name.
Exactly. The power is delegated, not inherent. It's a jurisdictional relationship.
But how exactly did that legal definition morph into biological divinity? Like, how do you get from a CEO's proxy to, physical offspring?
That is where the Greek metaphysics come in. Because when these texts spread into the Greco-Roman world, Greek-speaking intellectuals applied their own philosophical category.
And they didn't think in terms of legal proxies.
No, Greek philosophy was ontological. It was obsessed with the static nature of being, like what is the actual substance a thing is made of.
Ah, I see.
To a society steeped in Plato, a mere legal proxy felt weak. True power had to reside in your actual essence. And this brings us to a really crucial Greek metaphysical term from the texts.
Lay it on me.
The term is homoousios.
Homoousios.
Yeah, it roughly translates to co-essential substance, or of the same substance.
Wow, okay, so they introduced this word to change the meaning of the relationship.
Exactly. Early Western councils replaced the legal covenant with this concept. They took that jurisdictional delegated relationship, your CEO proxy, and declared that the representative was actually of the same substance as the creator.
Which completely turns a legal contract into a biological lineage.
It reshapes a message of absolute submission to a separate creator into this metaphysical mystery.
And directly violates that strict rule we established at the beginning. They locked the infinite creator into physical creation.
Right. The author argues this completely broke the unbroken monotheistic lineage of the prophets. Because figures like Moses strictly operated under a legal covenant, they never blurred the line between the creator and the created.
That makes sense. But it raises a huge question. If the original Semitic texts didn't contain this biological divinity and actually forbade it, this concept had to come from somewhere, right? Why introduce homoousios at all?
To answer that, you have to look at the audience those early councils were speaking to.
The Greco-Roman world.
Right, a world deeply steeped in paganism. This was a culture built entirely around the worship of traditional demigods and mythological systems.
So the idea of an abstract, separate creator who only uses legal proxies was, what, just completely foreign to them?
Completely foreign, and frankly, unappealing to the average Roman citizen. The author's central claim here is that the blueprint for the Western deity actually mirrors ancient pagan pantheons.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you listening. Because the sources are pointing out that this isn't some new theological revelation. It's literally the exact structural storyline of Zeus and Hercules.
It is explicitly that structure.
Right, so elaborate on that. How did the church system absorb these traditional demigod elements?
Well, think about the pagan architecture. You have a supreme deity like Zeus, and he produces a physical, earthly offspring who is part human, part divine, Hercules.
Right, a demigod who walks the earth and performs miracles.
Exactly. This demigod acts as a biological bridge between heaven and humanity. So when a Roman citizen heard a Semitic title like Son of God, they didn't picture a legal CEO proxy.
Their cultural framing led them straight to Hercules.
Exactly. And the stark contrast the author makes is that integrating this Zeus-like biological lineage completely broke that Semitic covenant. It fundamentally altered the religion to fit the expectations of the masses.
So instead of correcting the misunderstanding, the councils institutionalized it. They used homoousios to formally validate what the Greeks and Romans already believed.
They forced the Semitic language through the Greek filter, yeah. The names were changed to biblical figures, but the underlying architecture, the supreme God producing a divine human offspring, remained completely intact.
Okay, this brings me to the ultimate follow-the-money question.
Let's hear it.
Why? Why would Roman authorities officially synthesize biblical names with pagan structural storylines? Because this wasn't just some accident of translation, right?
Not according to the sources. The author argues it was a deliberate strategy for consolidation and control.
So what does this all mean for the average person living under Roman rule? What's the political calculus here?
Well, by absorbing these familiar pagan elements into their creeds, Roman authorities didn't preserve uncompromised monotheism. They rebranded traditional imperial concepts under biblical names.
To keep the peace.
To keep the peace and to consolidate political control over a massive, volatile pagan population.
Right, because if you're an emperor, you need the religious ideology to support your political structure.
Exactly. And this is where the theological shift affects the day-to-day reality. Locking the supreme creator into a physical framework wasn't just a theological debate. It justified top-down political dominance.
Oh, I see where this is going. Because if we maintain the pure Semitic framework, where the creator is entirely separate and earthly leaders only hold a temporary, conditional legal office, that is dangerous for an emperor.
Very dangerous.
Because a legal proxy can be fired. If the ruler becomes tyrannical, the contract is broken. The authority is conditional.
And conditional authority is the last thing an absolute Roman emperor wants. But if you use the pagan blueprint, if the heavens operate on a biological hierarchical lineage where a supreme god passes actual divine essence down to an earthly representative, then the earthly empire can mirror that.
So the emperor can claim his power isn't just a legal contract. He can claim divine essence, or at least lifetime imperial appointment that reflects the divine order.
Exactly. If the heavens operate on biological hierarchy, the earthly empire can demand absolute submission. You can't revoke a biological lineage or a coessential substance.
Wow. So the structure of heaven becomes the ultimate justification for the structure of the empire.
That's the argument. The synthesis was incredibly effective for maintaining a vast empire, but it required completely abandoning the original meaning of the Semitic texts.
The tone of the source text gets pretty fiery around here. The author is basically arguing that anyone defending this system should at least be intellectually honest about the history.
Yeah, the text is uncompromising on that point.
Because you get a completely different societal outcome when you look at faith through the lens of a creator's ultimate separate sovereign authority versus a Zeus-like biological lineage invented for useful political power.
It really forces you to step back and examine the architectural integrity of these belief systems.
It does. It highlights how vulnerable even the most revered texts are to the machinery of empire.
Which is why the author's core plea is just, check the linguistics, do the work of separating authentic historical origins from Greco-Roman philosophical rewrites.
It's a call for critical thinking.
Absolutely. Stop passing off Europeanized rewrites as authentic Semitic scripture.
Okay, let's summarize this journey for everyone listening, because we've covered a lot of dense ground today.
We definitely have.
We started by tracking how a strict, legal Semitic covenant, where the creator is totally separate, was funneled through Greek metaphysics.
Right, through that crucial word, homoousios.
Yes, homoousios, transforming a legal office into an ontological, biological lineage. And from there, we saw how that shift adopted the structural storylines of Zeus and Hercules.
Institutionalizing the pagan demigod concept for a Greco-Roman audience.
Exactly. And finally, we unpacked the imperial agenda behind it all, how Roman authorities used this synthesis to lock the creator into a physical framework, all to justify top-down political dominance and maintain control.
It's a challenging thesis, but a fascinating way to look at how words are weaponized by empires.
It really makes you wonder about the ground we walk on every day. We assume so much of what we've inherited is ancient and pure. But I want to leave you listening with a final thought to mull over.
Let's hear it.
If an entire empire could fundamentally mistranslate the language of a legal spiritual covenant into a biological mythology just to control a population, what other deeply held cultural truths or foundational beliefs that you accept as ancient are actually just political rewrites designed to maintain the status quo?
That's the exact kind of historical skepticism we should all be practicing.
Keep digging, keep questioning the sources of your knowledge, and don't be afraid to look closely at the blueprint. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.